Go over the 2019 proposed budget. I take it Mr. Brennan will be here tonight? Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to get started here. And at 6:31, okay, at 6:31 p.m., I call the Castle Hill Special City Council meeting to order and determine whether a quorum is present. And there is a quorum, and we need citizens' comments on non-agenda items. Minnie, can I see if anyone signed up, please, on non-agenda items? Is Amy? Okay. Good. I hear Amy's en route. Anybody signed up? No? Okay. Also, may I have a ping? Are we live? May I have a ping out there, please, from anyone that's out in Cyberland? All right. Since Amy's en route, we're going to go ahead and get started. And we're going to talk about on the first item is new business. Presentation and discussion, submission by the city manager's proposed fiscal year 2019 budget. Mr. Rapley?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I have a presentation for you which kind of gives you just an overview of the proposed budget. What I wanted to provide you is sort of the recap of the first two meetings, how we obviously discussed an overview of the departments, discussion on the property tax calculation, specifically implications with the first year of tax freeze, some revenue assumptions. We highlighted concerns on operations and expenditures, and then discussion on a budget overview and some other assumptions to formulate the proposed budget currently we have here today. I just want to say, obviously we as staff, myself, we are pleased to present you the proposed budget for fiscal year 2019. The proposed budget is guided by efforts dedicated by our professional staff and the continued support by you and Council, Mayor. The FY19 budget maintains current operating levels and represents the expended revenues and planned expenditures for the City of Castle Hills. Fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2019. As far as the process, each department director reviewed their budget proposal with the finance office and myself over a number of weeks before the collective departmental budgets are evaluated for the inclusion into the proposed operations or services for this coming year, and ultimately consideration for y'all as council. We as staff, myself, were able to evaluate the department's budget, help analyze, work to ensure we have provided a neutral budget and one that we've vetted out with the departments, not only through their expenditures, but in the development of this proposed budget itself. Again, what I'd like to just touch on is I'd like to thank the staff. There was a lot of hard work by Ms. Fegans, our department directors. It was a team effort in putting together this proposed budget for you to be presented tonight. And with that, Mayor, I'd like to go through some slides here real quick.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief. What I'd like to go through here is the 2019 budget overview, touch on personnel, and some conclusions and next steps. The proposed budget is balanced, transparent, and seeks to create a roadmap for success by continuing to build on solid foundation. The basic services are maintained at current levels and adequately funded. Reserves are maintained at adequate levels, which should protect the city from future uncertainties. Revenues will be established at reasonable levels utilizing historic data. Department and program costs were budgeted at a reasonable level, which will parallel the cost of providing service. as far as another key budget principle. Employee benefits and salaries are budgeted, if possible, with an increase. The proposed budget will comply with the provisions of state law, municipal code, and sound fiscal policy. Unassigned fund balance should be used for emergencies, one-time expenditures, and/or capital improvements moving forward. I want to touch on some general fund highlights. Obviously, the general fund includes the services of police, fire, public works, administration, and all of the city salaries are funded out of the general fund. Proposed general fund revenue totals, $6,940,027, and expenses are budgeted at the same $6,940,027. General fund budget is based on the ad valorem rate of 0.501345 per $100 valuation, which is less than the effective and rollback tax rates. The proposed budget is, again, like I touched on, based on being fiscally conservative and reflects a balanced budget. As part of the highlight for the general fund, we are proposing that the tax rate remain the same as the adopted budget did last year for 2018 to maintain general fund operations. Next slide. The property tax. As we discussed in one of the budget workshops, this is the first year of the tax freeze, so we wanted to provide you some time, information to consider the tax rate itself, especially like Ms. Fegans had presented last time, the anomaly with the new tax freeze. Total taxable value, freeze not included, is $536,832,192. Proposed total M&O revenue is budgeted at $3,485,329. Again, the current rate, ad valorem rate, 0.501345. If that is to remain, the revenue difference generated from FY 18 to 19 for the general fund would be an additional $58,861. If council would like to increase the rate by 1 cent, that equates to additional revenue dollars of that 1 penny for $53,683. Yes, Mayor.
Turn up his microphone, we have someone out inside the lane that can't hear us. Actually, go ahead, Mr. Bradford.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Next slide, Chief. Thank you. On this slide, I wanted to provide you an illustration of the revenues. The total revenue, again, like I stated, was $6,940,027. Sales and property taxes make up over $4.5 million of the total revenues. Other major revenue sources include municipal court, permit inspections, franchise fees, and sanitation. The city's second largest source of revenue is sales tax. Obviously, as we discussed at previous budget meetings, that sales tax is unpredictable, but we, in our best effort and try to find out in historical trends and revenues, trying to make it the exact amount of revenue that we will receive each year. The 2019 proposed budget assumes a conservative increase at the projected year ends of FY 2018. And in there I stated the total breakdown revenue, obviously the major revenue in the budget itself, all the way down to court income, franchise fees, concluding that, and other totals with associated revenue totals of $374,000. Next slide. Thanks. Uh-oh. Thank you, Chief. This is a graph showing the percentage, what comprises the revenue here. Obviously, the ad valorem being the largest piece of the pie here at 50%, and sales tax at 15%, and all other fees with the percentages associated with it as well. Next slide. Expenses. Expenses for the 2019 proposed budget are $6,940,027. The ending estimated total on reserve balance for the city is $3,294,987,000, which is slightly less than 6 months of operations. Obviously, as we mentioned before, personnel payroll costs make up the largest expense of the budget. City's largest expense is the city services, which is public safety, police, fire, dispatch, public works, street maintenance, sanitation, municipal court, and administration. And in the illustration there, I've broken down by department the expenses in this year's proposed budget. Next slide, Chief. This again is an illustration here which shows a percentage. Obviously, police department being the largest piece of the pie here at 36%, following fire department from that standpoint, and the next largest one being the administration budget. Streets and drainage funds in the 2019 proposed budget. Obviously, as we discussed before, that City Council recognizes that long-term street repairs are needed across the city. The idea is to prioritize these needs collectively in a CIP, Capital Improvements Program, and identify funding options for much-needed street repairs, and including drainage. Those funds being the street maintenance, drainage utility, supplemental street funds are available for future infrastructure projects. Revenue for project could be generated for the use of, by the use of the the street maintenance sales tax, digital billboard, and the possibility of issuing certificates of obligation. Obviously, these costs will be reflected in the FY 2019 budget. Right there on the slide, I've listed the totals, the proposed totals for each of those funds, being the street maintenance, drainage, and supplemental street. I've identified potential projects that I've listed here, that a couple were already, I'd say, in the pipeline. Engineering is complete on Antler and North Manton, and most recently, there's costs related to Banyan that are under review for future city council consideration. Next slide. Thanks, Chief. Under Capital Replacement Fund, Contingency Fund, Major Vehicle Equipment Purchase, we're proposing about $635,602. It includes expenditures for the replacement of a sanitation truck. Under the Community Infrastructure Economic Development Program, SEED, $462,351. Below, I've listed a possible expenditures for City Council to consider for use of this fund moving forward, which, as we talked about last meeting, engaging a consultant to possibly conduct a facility assessment of this municipal building, energy audit and review the feasibility of a solar array project for the building, electrical improvements in the commons in order to support events we have there, and then municipal facility improvements, interior improvements to the building, including new carpet, paint, audio-visual improvements to the City Hall chambers, and which also could include exterior improvements if necessary to the building. Under our workstation upgrade, we have $29,136 for that fund. I'd like to go a little bit into the proposed budget personnel. Go ahead, Chief. There we have our organizational chart, which provides a breakdown of all our departments, an inventory of staff in those departments, contract services, and then the boards associated with our organization itself. Next, Chief. Personal highlights in the proposed budget. Right now, we've programmed in the cost of living adjustment for city staff of 3% to the budget. The proposed budget includes 3 vacant and funded positions in the Public Works Department, thus being a project manager, and 2 positions in the street, which total $157,975. I've put a caption there that the positions are retained, but under a hiring freeze right now. Request for an assistant fire chief is currently not programmed into the proposed budget and is unfunded. We have a placeholder right now for 15% increase in the city's health plan, awaiting proposed rate increases for that. Next slide, Chief. This is just a quick breakdown of the COLA itself being personal expenses. Obviously, $5,512,843 is currently. Adding 1% is an increase of about 47,000, 2%, 95,000, and then we've built in the 3% at 143,000. Next slide, Chief. Again, this is part of our discussion with council at the last meeting. We've able to program in some projects and some of the requests by the departments. Replace 3 air conditioning units at City Hall. We have budgeted $30,000. Digital marquee at City Hall, budgeting $16,000. Set aside funds for future radio upgrade and fire. In 2020, budgeted $30,000. Replace 6 sets of firefighter gear, budgeted $16,800. We have to plug in the first year payment for our, the second year. Plug in the second year for our payment of our our fire truck, our ladder platform truck. The principal payment is $74,257 and an interest payment of $13,279. Again, we built in the 3% COLA, and we've put a placeholder in for the possibility of a 15% increase in the city's health plan. The next steps, I've put here: discussion, vote on a proposed tax rate, schedule public hearing on tax rate if required, possible workshops to continue the discussion to modify and evaluate this working document before adoption, August 14th, August 21st, and August 28th. Published notice of 2018 proposed tax rate, effective and rollback August 15th. Public hearings on the budget, first reading, we have listed as in the budget calendar, September 11th, and then the second hearing dated September 18th. So, and with that, Mayor, I would like to say, I would like to thank the department directors who have given their time and expertise in the development of this budget. Additionally, development of this budget would not have been possible without the hard work of our financial consultant. I would like to give a special thanks to all employees who continue to work hard to provide quality services to our residents in the city of Castle Hills. I'm confident with this budget that it prepares the city of Castle Hills for success moving forward. With your support and dedication and capable staff, we will ensure that our quality of services are provided to the citizens of Castle Hills. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, before we get started and council dives into the questions, is there, would you explain to everyone how we changed the process this year as far as templates and things like that, and where we got some of those templates in order to upgrade our presentation? Normally,
Mayor, I'm sorry.
the way we've done it in the past is we've gone a laboring line by line. Sometime we were here till 4 in the morning. Is that correct, Douglas? Okay, 4 in the morning one time, I remember. And this time I noticed that you changed the format as far as templates and the way you did things, which broke it down into slides and pies and things like that in order to simple. Dover, will you turn that down just a little bit, please? Thank you. Where did you come up with that idea? Is this things that you've done in other cities, or did you get that from Ms. Fegans, or?
Well, part of this process, again, is what my experience with other cities in putting together the budget, not only from the proposal stage to the adoption. Ms. Fegans has worked for multiple cities, the same process.
Okay.
How the template of the budget is structured is intent to be transparent, informational, and so our citizens can understand how we put this budget process together,
okay.
What certain questions they may have in the document itself. This is not different from any other city, at least I've
Okay.
worked in and experienced as far as putting the budget together, or Ms. Fegans from that standpoint.
Okay.
Again, we provided the budget calendar and outlined the process back in June, how this was going to be structured from that standpoint. That's why I opened the meeting.
Well, how come this document's 87 pages, and I think the largest one we've had of late is what, 10 pages? Something like that?
I'm not sure, Mayor.
You're not sure? Okay.
Again,
all right.
I can't speak to previous years, how the budget was put together. I'm just going off my experience, Ms. Fegan's experience in preparing municipal budgets.
Thank you. Okay. Let's dive into this, and I'm sure some people have some questions. Nobody signed up, so we'll dive right into council. Reminding everyone that we will have public hearings, I believe, twice, and in the future.
And Mayor, I just want to make a point that, again, whatever is discussed with council as far as program into the budget, this again is a working document, so we'll be back with potential revisions or replacements or additional projects, or if it's personnel requests that a council might like to see, we'll have to program that into the budget from that standpoint.
Okay. Mr. McCormick, did you want to weigh in or have a few comments or questions?
As I understand, Mr. Rapley, that the proposed tax rate is only 1 cent over last year's rate, is that correct?
It's the same, it's just the valuations went up, so we'll get an additional 58,000.
I thought I saw a slide that said we were increasing the tax rate by 1 cent.
If you decided to increase by 1 cent, the total revenue you would get from a 1 cent would be the 53,000.
Okay, but is that a recommendation or is that just a comment?
We were proposing that city council remains the same rate,
Okay,
because again, the budget is balanced, and if there's additional projects you'd like to see, we highlighted those under the capital expense, so if you wanted to remove those projects, we can program those in at council's request. Or add at that point.
I noticed that you have replacement of the air conditioning units. What about repairs to the building? You know, Ms. Thielen has looked around and pointed out a number of places where the fascia and soffit have rotted through and definitely need to be replaced.
Well, again, I think, Mr. McCormick, by hiring a consultant to evaluate the building itself, would be able to give outline for improvements, not only exterior, interior, so we'd be able to budget accordingly from that standpoint, and like I was saying, use the seed fund to provide funding for that.
And who would we hire as a consultant? Any idea what that would cost yet?
We're kind of figuring about $20,000 right now, or less, so.
Just for the consultant? Our building inspector
It's a
wouldn't be qualified to do it?
I mean, a feasibility study if you wanted a sort of an A to Z evaluation of the building itself.
How long, do you have any idea how long it's been since our roof has been replaced?
No, 2 years?
I mean, how long?
2 years.
2 years, okay, that's good.
After the hailstorm.
Then we're just looking at doing a fairly superficial exterior repairs.
I think the idea is if we had a plan and it required phases to do these things, both interior and exterior, we'd be able to budget accordingly over the next, 2 or 3 budgets if we had to address things long-term.
Just in relation to the amount of money that we seem likely to spend on the exterior repairs, it sounds like the cost of an expert to do the evaluation might be a little on the high side, relatively speaking. I'm thinking, my look around kind of gives me a feeling of around $100,000, maybe less, for the exterior. But of course, that doesn't include the idea of putting an entrance roof over the porch roof over the doors.
And we can get some kind of proposal together to send out to see if, we can get with our building inspector to help with how to lay out that proposal to see if we get anybody to submit for anything.
Sound like a good idea.
Obviously get his input, what I mean.
And we're not, nothing in the budget right now would, the position for an assistant chief in the fire department is not funded in this budget, is that right?
It's currently not programmed in. One thing I didn't, I talked to the chief, he does have a vacant position right now, but what I only highlighted was vacant and funded positions that are not under the hiring freeze. So he could fill that vacancy. Right now, it's for just a entry-level firefighter. So we could probably find, if we could, find the additional dollars, probably anywhere from 15 to 20,000 to make it an assistant fire chief if necessary.
You'd have to have that, I think you still have to have that one.
Yeah, that position in the fire department wouldn't be under the hiring freeze that we implemented.
Yeah. I just listed and highlighted, again, because we have a hiring freeze, that we built in those 3 positions still. They're funded, and if council wanted to lift the hiring freeze, we could actually advertise for those 3 positions.
Well, hiring freeze stops on its own volition in October in any case, before the next budget would begin to be implemented.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going off again, council's.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. Ms. Scott?
Okay, I have a couple concerns here. It says here that the proposed budget will comply with the provisions of state law, municipal code, and sound fiscal policy. One of my concerns is that the proposed budget does not comply with the municipal code, because currently under our municipal code, under section 18-24, regular firefighter positions, it is stated that we have at least, so a minimum of 20 regular, fully paid positions. Right now, we have 19, so, and we have one open. However, it continues to say that the city council may create additional positions by ordinance at any time, so more than 20 anytime council wishes, and that one of such positions can be of fire chief and one of the assistant fire chief. So of those 20 positions, one should be fire chief and one of assistant fire chief. So currently, this budget does not comply with our own municipal code, stating that we should have a fire chief and assistant fire chief. So I think that does need some serious looking into as this working multiple budget, as it.
And again, as I mentioned, council member, that this is obviously the proposed budget, and so we're going to tweak, modify, incorporate any input you have as council. And so at the point of adoption, that's when, again, compliance is ultimately involved. from that
Okay, so
standpoint.
I just want to make sure, because
Sure.
if we are going to comply with our own municipal code, we do need to seriously look at making sure that that is a funded position, not no longer an unfunded position, if we're going to comply, if that's part of the principles of this budget.
And again, I appreciate the input. This is a working document, so over the next 30 days, we want to be able to incorporate any of council's concerns.
Okay, I had another concern, because it continues to say that it's going to comply with sound fiscal policy. And I brought with me a copy of the audit. I can pull it up if I want. I have it up here. But as far as sound fiscal policy, I would say the audit pretty much outlined what we should and shouldn't do as far as sound fiscal policy. And in there, it was recommended that our current software was not up to date, not up to speed. We did have one council approve a new software program that was recommended that said that that would bring us up to speed. It was then brought up that the other council members were uncomfortable, feeling that maybe it wasn't the best solution. So there are other software solutions out there. I see nowhere in this budget for investigation of alternative software. So if not Encode, then what? Because it's been said in our audit that the current Assist program is not adequate to keep us fiscally sound, that it leaves some holes and some gaps and places for mistakes to be made and for monies to possibly go missing. That really concerns me a lot. So that is not in this budget at all. So if we want to have a fiscally sound budget, we need to make sure that we're protecting the citizens' money. So I would love to see somewhere worked into here a line item for new software. I'm not particularly attached to one or the other. Actually, I kind of am, because it fits with what we have. But if there's something better that fits with what we have, that works with our other modules, we have Encode with the other departments, but if there's a software that's better, as Mr. McCormick mentioned, he said he wasn't sure that Encode, one of the reasons why he voted to get rid of Encode was that it was not, he wasn't sure it was the best software for our finance department. So let's find out what's the best one out there. If it's not Encode, what is it? And whatever it is, how much is it going to cost? But we need something. We need something to make ourselves fiscally sound. So I'd like to see that, once again, worked in there, some sort of software fees, because what we have now, according to our audit, is not sufficient. So I think that's something that we need to think about.
Okay, thank you, Council.
Let me see, I think I have a couple other things marked, let me get through here. Okay, you're suggesting the same tax rate. I marked a few things as we went through. Okay. Oh, the only other thing I did notice in the budget, that was $16,000 set aside for possibly a digital marquee at City Hall. That was the only thing I found to be kind of what I would consider a frivolous expense at this point, because the marquee we have, I believe, is adequate. It gives information. There's enough room on it for the meetings that are being had. They fit. It works. It's functional. So maybe that might be something to look at to put off until we maybe are a little further along, or maybe, you know, we have a little bit more money to spend. But I certainly feel like financial software and fully meeting our ordinance, our municipal code, and filling all of our positions would outweigh spending money on signage. And that's everything I had marked. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Ms. McLean, did you have any comments?
Yes, Mayor, I did. I would echo what Mrs. Scott has said about the assistant fire chief, since we have our municipal code, which requires us to have one, and also regarding the audit and making sure that we have addressed the issues that Ms. Frazier brought up about open areas where fraud is potential. I'd like to protect the citizens' money. The other thing I would like to bring up is that I don't see anything in here where we have budgeted for covered parking for first responder vehicles. And in accordance with the Bexar County Hazard Mitigation Plan that we adopted last summer, we are required within 24 months of the plan adoption, which was 12 months ago, to construct covered wind-resistant parking for first responders and emergency public works vehicles to protect essential assets from hail damage, wind-driven falling objects, thunderstorm winds, tornado, hurricane damage, extreme heat for vehicles with computer equipment, which I think our police cars have a lot of computer equipment in them, and other severe weather events. This is Bexar County countywide action number 8, so every jurisdiction that has signed off on this mitigation plan is required to address this. And I don't see anything in the budget where we are budgeting for the covered parking for these vehicles to protect our assets and help maintain the health and safety of our citizens. I also echo the comments regarding the digital billboard. On June 5th, I posted on Nextdoor kind of asking in anticipation of the budget season what our residents, what the citizens want for our city. And I kind of did a loose tally of those today. And I had 130 comments on that thread with about 75 to 80 distinct ideas of what people want. And hands down, I had 17 comments that were about code enforcement and a couple of other stories about code enforcement that I didn't count in the tallies. These were residents who specifically stated that they want more time and effort spent on code compliance. Very, very close under that was police and speeding and speed bumps with 13 kind of tally marks or comments about health and safety based on the speed on streets, having police protection because of the additional break-ins that we've been experiencing down in the Southern Cone. And then it's a very smattering of other things, from walking and biking and park and library and all kinds of other wish list items. But hands down, code enforcement and health and safety seem to be assuming that we're taking care of streets and drainage. And that was what my thread couched the answers on. I wanted to know besides streets and drainage, because I think all of us sitting up here understand that those are important. But besides that, and so if we could look into either San Antonio uses the 311, they use a 311 app for code enforcement, where citizens can report code enforcement problems. There's another, what is it called, Moretta, the CLIck?
It's called C-Click Act, I think is what it is. I have it right here. Well, I did. If you'll just give me 1 second to see. It's called C-Click Fix. It's also an app where you see a problem in the city, you click a picture of it with your phone, you send it in through the app, goes straight to code compliance, directly to the proper office because it has drop-down menus, so it sends it to directly to the correct person. Then it allows back and forth comments between the individual that reported the problem and sent the pictures of the problem and the person that received those photos of the code compliance issue. Then that person, whether it be our code compliant officer, one of our investigative officers, or somebody, can then respond directly back to that person, let them know, I received your issue, it's being looked into, it's gonna take so many days or X amount of time. And then they're allowed to have a back and forth dialogue, so they know that the issue is being worked on and they can be updated in real time as the issue is being done. And that's called See, Click, Fix. And I did go ahead and fill out some information for them to get some quotes from them on how much it would cost for us to use an app or that particular app. And I'm continuing to look into other apps that are out there.
You know, right now, we have obviously the Civic Plus notification that you send in for code enforcement investigation or review right now that Mr. Zamorone gets right now. But
Do they go straight to him,
They
or
go
do
s-
they have to be
they go straight
vetted
to
through
him,
someone
and
else?
they go straight to him.
Okay.
That's where the See, Click, Fix is so good, is that it creates a constant communication with the residents, so they're kept in the loop about the status of fixing the problem. And so you have a higher level of customer service that goes along with it. But, I mean, seeing what people are asking for and knowing how busy Louis is, I feel like we need to seriously look at part-time hourly help, something like that, because this is something that residents are asking for, and his time is tapped out. So,
And also with an app, if they're actually getting feedback and they know that the process isn't an insta-fix, like I reported it, I want it fixed tomorrow, and he can quickly type back, I'm looking into this issue, it's going to take so many business days before I can begin to, start on it, or, but just being acknowledged. People just want to be acknowledged, and I see a lot when I'm reading through Nextdoor threads, if only when someone would acknowledge me or call me back or let me know what's going on, and that's where I feel like an app would be really good, because it's giving that back and forth, so the citizen feels like they're a part of the
Again, he
solution.
does receive those notifications, and obviously, that is an administrative process, so sometimes it could take, or exhaust out certain, notification and going through those, the due diligence of, when he puts out the notices, there's a compliance timeframe for anybody to comply with that standpoint. If they don't, then there's a series of administrative procedures before it even gets to the judicial process, so.
Well, see, I understand that, but I think where we're lacking in communication is the average citizen doesn't realize how long it takes. People are used to an instant gratification world right now. If I want a cheeseburger, I go down to my favorite place and I drive through and I get it like that and I have a cheeseburger. So if my neighbor's not cutting their lawn and I've sent an email in through the code compliance app, I expect someone to be out there that afternoon getting the lawn mowed or seeing them put a citation on the door. We live in an instant society. So that's the only reason that I'm even suggesting looking into the possibility of an app that gives them that instant gratification of you're acknowledged, you're seen, it's being worked on, because they don't always know how long the process is. And it is a long process to actually get someone to mow their lawn or to move their junk car or whatever that you're concerned about. So mine is just that communication.
Yeah, and I think each possible violation is different on, not necessarily the notification, but the process for corrective action.
You better be careful, Mr. Ryan, that's going to put Leslie and I out of business. People who call and complain to us, that's going to put us out of business, so,
We'll
That's
replace
funny,
you with,
folks.
replace you with an app, I guess, Mayor.
okay. Well, it wouldn't be the first time somebody's replaced me with something.
those were all of my extra comments. I'm not going to duplicate what others have said, but thank you for your effort. I appreciate some of the things that have been included in it, like the HVAC and other forward-looking items, like having an audit done of the building. I think that's very important so that we can see where we can save money, whether it's utilities or on other things.
I
Thank you,
think,
Mr.
again,
McLennan.
On the building itself, as we've talked about it before, is getting that sort of assessment and a plan in place to say, if we're going to be in this building long-term, how much money do we want to put into that building versus down the road if we ever have to expand our municipal service, build another city hall down the road. You never know in 10 years from that standpoint, but we need a plan in place. and we need to be able to identify what needs to happen and correct it through the budget process.
Thank you. Ms. Winger?
What I don't see in this budget is any cuts in the departments. Have I missed them?
Cuts in the departments?
Yeah.
Well, again, in evaluating this budget with the departments, we were able to work through sort of their operational matters, whether it was all the way down to supplies or those kind of things. We were able to kind of not only prioritize, but again, estimate what is needed to determine that proposed budget. So we were able to vet those things out, again, to bring a balanced budget through the entire process.
Yeah, but that's not my question. Were there any cuts?
No.
Okay. That's a disappointment because that's what most of the citizens would like to see because they want to see more money put into streets and drainage. I don't disagree that there's also a question about code compliance, but mostly what people want to see is more money being put into streets and drainage. And it appears from this that we're actually cutting that from streets. So I guess I have a bunch of questions. I want to know, first of all, what is the COLA for Social Security for this year? Do you know?
We were able to look online, and they were looking at 3% right now.
At Social Security?
Their discussion right now that we were able to find online, through the federal government, they're discussing 3% right now.
Well, that'll be a miracle. We haven't seen anything like
Up to
that in a while.
3%, so.
The articles even, people talking about it say up to 3, and that's unusual, yes.
Okay, well, I guess if they're doing it, that's one thing, but if they're not, it doesn't look to me from this budget like we can afford anything like that. And we haven't had that kind of increase in Social Security, let alone have we had it here.
Again, I just programmed at 3% because that might be the possibility. You have every right as council to deviate from that, to add to dollars towards something else in the budget, like streets. Again, under the capital expenses, we itemize those requests, and not only from council, but from departments. And if you wanted to redirect those expenses to put in a surplus for streets, that's your priority as council.
Right, yes, and I understand that, thank you.
So-
On page 25, and of course I'm referring to the book that we were given, why are the LGB collections removed?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Councilman?
Page 25.
The what was removed, I'm sorry?
The LGB collections.
The Linebarger?
Yeah, they're not in here.
Those are we discussed that at the very first workshop.
sorry?
We discussed that at the first workshop. Lineburger fees are the fees that are added on to a court ticket for their collection, and is their money. It's a statute that allows that fee to be added on, and it is not our funds, it's not our revenue or expense, and it's typically on the balance sheet. So we've moved it off because it's not your revenue, it's a pass-through, and so we've moved that out of revenue and out of expense. This current budget that you're in right now, the numbers are not the same, they're not equal on revenue and expense. In prior budget, they were equal, which is what, if we leave them, which again, I feel like they don't need to be there, but we would make both numbers be equal and it would have no effect on the budget. And the court tax is the same way. No, it's always been a pass-through, but what occurs is that it's being booked as a revenue, and then the expense is being booked in the municipal court department. At the end of the year, your auditors were netting those two together because they aren't your revenue or expense. So the effect, yeah. It basically comes in and comes out. You don't get anything off of Lineburger. You don't collect anything. It's 100% their money. If they happen to,
What Lineburger is collecting money for us, and you're saying we're not getting it?
No, they are a collection agency, And they're allowed by state statute to add a percentage, and I don't have that percentage in my head right now, onto a ticket. And that percentage is their money.
So that,
If
I guess
someone
that's not my
pays-
question. My question is, where is the money that they're bringing us?
So if a customer, if a defendant comes in and pays a ticket that has gone to collections, that fee has been added on, and if they pay at our window, we have to send that additional fee to Lineberger.
Yeah, but
But
that's
they
not-
paid the ticket here.
That's not my
If-
question.
If someone
Okay.
pays directly to Lineberger, they send us our court fees and they keep their fee.
Ms. Fegan, what she's asking, okay, is why would a financial director in the past put those fees in as an income when they really were not an income at all?
That's not what I'm asking.
That's exactly what you're asking.
it's not.
Well,
I know what I'm asking.
I know what you're asking, but I'm telling you that in the past, our financial directors have put that in as income. It is not income.
But I'm not asking that.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not. Let
What are
me
you
ask
asking?
my question, and then,
You've asked
you
it
know,
3 times, Leslie.
I'm asking, is there any place in here that I've missed, and I may have, and that's why I'm asking the question, where the money that Lineberger collects for us, I'm not asking about their fees.
It goes into your court revenue, into your
That's
court
in the
revenue line.
court revenue.
It's in your
Okay.
court revenue line,
Okay.
yes.
So that's all I'm asking.
Yeah, so
I'm not asking
that's
about
why
the
we
fees.
remove those, because they're not your fee.
What?
I mean, you can make it be equal, you can leave it this way. You would have it, if you say your revenue, I mean, say the Lineberger fee is gonna be 40, you would have 40 as an expense, and the effect on your budget is
Right.
0.
Because it looked like we weren't getting anything, and that's why I'm asking the question.
Yes.
Yeah, I know the difference between their fees.
Yeah, and then again, in the past, this particular budget that we're in currently, the numbers aren't equal on each side, which they should have been. In past budgets, that's how they did it, they put them both sides with the same amount, so
Okay.
that it didn't affect your budget.
Okay.
Although it made your budget look larger than it
Okay.
really is.
Okay. So now, the other question I have, and, you know, Tim has raised this as well, is that I don't understand the reduction in the sales and use tax, and I did send Mr. Rapley some recent stats, which weren't very difficult to access, and I had asked for you to print it out, so since you didn't do it previously for their next meeting, could you please get that? Because it doesn't indicate that we're losing any sales tax.
For this meeting, I didn't receive anything specifically to print out for this meeting.
I'm sorry?
I didn't receive anything related
Yeah.
to sales tax from you to print out for this meeting.
Yeah, I did. I sent it to you when we were coming in, this is a couple of weeks ago at least, when Douglas and I were having a meeting, and the reason I couldn't print it out
Well, I
is
was
that
under the
needed-
different notion because, again, this meeting with Mr. Gregory was on fiscal policies from that standpoint, and that was the intent of our meeting,
Right.
not necessarily sales tax, but we can explore that
Yeah.
as well.
Well, if you don't have it anymore, let me know, because I have it. But there are more recent stats that don't show that we have a reduction, so, and I got it off the state controller, so I don't understand why this is showing that.
So that report that you sent, because we did look at it, but again, we weren't meeting on that. Those numbers also include your street maintenance dollars. So you have to take the quarter cent out of that report, because the state reports it together, and we have to manually separate it.
Okay, okay.
So if you take that out, it falls along with what's being collected and reported currently.
So we're the only city that's losing sales tax?
Again, what we said at the beginning, at the first meeting, is I think your budget numbers that are in the current budget were high. Not that you're losing money, but you have seen a 3.6% decrease, and the state's report says the same thing. It was actually 3.5 something something, which if you round up is 3.6.
Right, but the state has averaged an 11.8%. So,
Well, now, I can't, on the state side, I'm looking at the city's
well,
portion.
I'm saying
only.
they've done it for the whole, yeah.
Yes, and again, different cities have different things in Texas, but when you look at just ours, because that's what we have to, what the money
Okay.
we collect. But the report you have, just when you look at those dollars, make sure you are taking out the quarter cent that goes to street, because that number won't be the same reflection in the general fund.
And when you look at the sheet, as far as the 5-year average has been 997,000. So in 17, you got 1,033,000. So again, that was maybe a little bit of a higher dollar figure to budget for last year from that standpoint, based on the 5-year average.
Okay, so then, I know recently at a meeting we were discussing, Ms. McLean we were talking, brought it up, we were talking about the cost of our garbage pickup. As you know, part of that cost is the sales tax. Have you included that garbage tax also, that sales tax, in your overall?
That's reported to the state, and they send it back to us, yes.
So it's all
It's as if
in
we
this
were-
lowered amount, both the garbage sales tax, the street tax, everything's included in that.
Yeah, the garbage sales tax is sent to the state as if we were a separate business. It is sent to the state just like a restaurant would, and then it's returned back to us, so it's included, yes.
Okay, so that's all in there?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
ma'am. Very good question.
Boy. Let's see. Then you have radio maintenance. Isn't that supposed to come out of the core technology fund?
No.
Which radio maintenance, as
That
far
would be
as,
ticket rider. Yeah, which department are you looking at?
I was looking at Muni Court.
I think it's listed under the department there that we have. Under the section where we list.
You're meaning cell phone and radio maintenance line item?
Yeah,
It says radio maintenance, that line item across each department is labeled that, but the only thing that's in municipal court is a cell phone and tablet,
oh,
the monthly fees.
so it's
Yes.
only for the cell phone, so
And his tablet, or
who
his
gets
air
the
card.
cell phones?
Just the gentleman that is a warrant officer.
The warrant officer
officer,
is not an employee, I gather.
He's, yes. And so he has
Now an employee?
he's a contract employee.
He's a contract employee.
Right, mhm.
And as a contract employee, he's the only one, and we're giving him a cell phone?
Well, no, for court, I mean, you were asking about court, I'm just in court. That's the only, there's no one else in court receiving that.
Nobody in court has a cell phone?
No, ma'am, they do not.
Okay.
The court clerks, no, ma'am.
Only the warrant officer?
Yes. And the air card, it's like the tablet type air card,
Okay.
MDT.
So now on page 34, part-time salaries for the police are running $17,401, and yet it's projected at $10,000. So I have a question about that.
So that's for dispatch? Is the part-time piece is for dispatch?
Is it?
Mm-hmm, yes, ma'am. And I did not really change budget numbers for salaries, because in salaries, there is some savings. So we can go back and readjust, but I think Johnny can answer exactly how many are in dispatch that are part-time.
And we have four slots and currently one part-time, but we lost 2 recently. And that's more than last year because of the training that went into bringing them on board.
Oh, so what you're saying is that, but this is projected for 2019, so it says they're running 17,401, and you're saying it's gonna go down? Is that what you're saying, Johnny?
So what we'll need to do is, what I can do is look at what additional may be going on, because I took the part-time employees that he gave me in the list and their salaries based on the number of hours that they're supposed to be working. So there may be some other factors happening in there, and we can verify
let's
that that
look at
number
that.
is still good,
Yeah,
because
let's look at that, so we don't.
I did see the same thing, but when I put in what he gave me, it seems to be around 10, unless it's the number of hours is not correct.
Right.
So we can check.
Because it's a concern, because if the initial figure is correct, then we're going to
And
exceed.
it may be that we have it in, just not enough number of hours, and that's why it's going over
Okay.
again.
Now, the other question, and I guess we're calling it HIDA or something, that's the DEA officer, okay. That appears to be costing us about $13,000 a year, and I understand we also pay benefits on that. That's on top of that.
Okay.
Is that correct?
When you say costing, where are you coming up? We'll make sure we're following what
No,
number you're
Johnny
talking
knows.
We
about.
pay benefits, he's an employee of the city,
Right.
but his salary is reimbursed from HIDA, that's.
But it's not all reimbursed. They reimburse us 40,000, and we're paying
I don't know the
53,000.
exact dollar amount because it comes in quarterly.
And it's a percentage.
I'm just going by what's in here. I may be wrong, I'm just going by what's in here.
Yeah,
It's 8, I don't know if Nora, with the percentage on the HIDA? That they reimburse? They don't reimburse the full amount, do you? Okay, yeah.
I think it was more last year, and then this year was, this year was a little less as a percentage.
But we're only getting 40,000.
If that's what
If
that
that's,
is. I
if
don't
that
see
stays at
Right.
that number, yes.
And the salary that he's being paid is 53,000. So from the get-go, it's costing us 13,000.
That would be correct.
And then there are benefits on top of that.
That is correct.
Yeah, and the benefits run what, like 20%, I believe Mr. Rapley said.
And then, but he also, by being in that, we have received a lot of money that's in the forfeiture fund. So you have to kind of think of those additional benefits that are in another fund that you're not seeing in the general fund.
Right,
So
but the problem is, again, I get these questions from people who live here who are paying the taxes, okay? So that's why I'm asking them. The problem is that we're paying for this out of the general fund, and we don't see anything from that other fund. So that's the problem.
Well, we use HIDA resources on a daily basis, whether it's our K-9 or whether it's their license plate readers at the border or anywhere else around the state. So we do see a benefit to the agency in that regard that we couldn't otherwise pay out of the general, we'd have to pay out of the general fund to have access to.
Okay,
So
so
there's-
maybe you could let us know
Sure.
by the next time what it is that we're seeing so that I can explain that to
Absolutely.
people.
Absolutely.
That's all I'm
I'd be happy to
asking.
do that. Yes, ma'am.
That'd be great, thank
You
you,
bet.
Johnny. Okay, so now, on the PD salary budget, it looks like we're increasing that by 26,857. And in the fire department, we're increasing it by 39,687. What's the deal with that?
you've got several positions that are step, so part of that is related to step.
Several what?
That have a step increase. They get a raise in over a 5-year period.
In the fire department?
And the police department as well, they both have the same.
Yeah, I
They're not the
understand,
same
but
dollars, though.
But the fire department's higher. Here comes Chief Dover.
Yes,
It's because of the number of men that will be reaching their next step level for next year.
Okay.
In the last probably year and a half to 2 years, we've actually hired, three to four new firefighters that came in at entry-level salaries, and now they're reaching their next year's step increase that is being added on to their additional salary, or additionally to their
So
salary.
it is correct that the salary increase is higher for the fire department this coming year than it is?
Yes, ma'am.
Probably
Okay.
because there's more officers getting those steps. And then again, as you look at that, as we're going to remind you that we built in the 3% COLA already, so it might look higher just because.
Oh, I see. So without the 3% COLA, it comes down?
Yes,
Okay, I get
yes.
it. Thank you very much. Okay, now, the street salaries, this is on page 40, look like they're decreasing. And is that because we don't have two of the employees, or?
well, no. That's why we mentioned they are still fully funded, the 2 vacant positions that are frozen, they're still fully funded.
Okay.
And the project manager that was put in the 18 budget, it's still in there. When I put the numbers together, the part-time person, that's the custodian, in the budget document of 2018, that salary was added into salaries full-time. I think it was just an erroneous error, and it wasn't subtracted out. So that was like a kind of a plus of 17,000. So when you put in the 3%, he's got 1 or 2 that are going to have a step, it made it be a decrease, which is a positive thing in a way, but it was an error, it's really what it ended up being.
Okay,
So, yeah,
all right,
it kind of threw me. I think I recalculated that several times.
yeah. Now again, again on page 40, it looks like we're cutting 175,000 out of street maintenance.
Okay, good question, and that's a great question, because,
Yeah.
yes, and okay. When I reviewed this, when I first got here, before I was going into budget side, working with the auditors, the end of the year entry that happens when we move money from the general fund balance to the street drainage and supplemental fund, and just in general, we're helping them and looking at this budget and talking with Rick, the Public Works Director, and his assistant when she codes invoices. It was like, it says prior council approval. The more we discussed, there's never been, you can see there's only been a little bit of money in 17 to that line item.
I'm sorry, say that again?
There's only been $1,974 in 2017 that hit that line item. I believe, and I wasn't here in prior years, but
Before you go on, there's a correction to what I told you earlier this evening of where that came from. That was money, and there was an incident of the parking lot was being paved, yet it was called a street. So a certain amounts of monies were pulled and designated in future that all those monies had to come to council. I don't think I told you that correctly this afternoon.
yeah, so what I can see is
That wasn't 175,000.
there's no transfer in from your street fund. You have the street sales tax fund. There's no transfer coming in. There wasn't money moved from it to cover your expenses last year or in 2016 or in 2015. So the expenses that happened on the line right above came out of your general fund revenue, did not come from any other pot of money. And again, talking with Rick, I think we talked about the slurry seal that was a possibility. I don't have a good, when I look at the budget document that's there now, I don't have good explanations. There's not telling me what projects possibly they were looking at for in 2018.
Okay,
But there's no offset, so that 175 was not coming from somewhere else to offset it. So we have taken it out because it's not, if it was meant to come from another fund, there should be a transfer in that would net it to zero.
so that's your explanation.
And we were, in reviewing the budgets and discussing with Rick that, obviously there was the project that was for the slurry seal on West Avenue, that might have been about 160,000 or so that was actually, identified last year for the projects. So again, we feel that might have been identified for that project, from that standpoint. But again, with that project, there's a few variables, with not only VIA and some other work that needs to be done on West Avenue before we'd probably even consider doing any type of work on West Avenue for at least a slurry seal from that standpoint.
So that's included in that.
Well,
All right, so that's different from what you said.
Well, there's 50,000, the line above, that would be for asphalt pothole patching, possibly your alleyways, seal coating of the city parking lot that's not coming from anywhere but general fund.
It's what?
So some of the work that Public Works has done, and Rick can expand, but like the recent work that was done on the aprons over on the alleys, on Banyan, that's where the money was expensed from that standpoint. Routine maintenance, like Ms. Fegan said, asphalt repair, possibly sidewalks,
Well, all I'm
curbs.
saying is, let's get a better explanation that people understand, because I'm having trouble absorbing it. And the thing is, anytime it looks like we're cutting money out of streets, we're in trouble. We want to go the reverse. We want to put more money into streets and take money from someplace else. And this looks like, to people reading it, as though we're taking the money out. So I want to have a very clear explanation for the public, okay?
Yes.
Okay, so now, I have a little bit of concern about this organizational flow chart, because there's several positions on here that we don't have, such as we don't have a water department, therefore we don't have a water director. Do we
Well,
have, Johnny?
I've provided, it's in the actual presentation, it's revised. I have copies for councils to
Okay,
take
so
with
you
them.
revised it.
Yes, there's a revised, and again, I appreciate the input, and as we're working through this document over the next 30 days, if you identify anything else, please bring it to our attention so we can incorporate it before the adoption. But,
Well, how did it get in here in the first place?
I'm sorry?
How did it get in the first place?
How do I get what?
How did that title get in here? We've never had it.
Well, again, we're working off a organizational chart from that standpoint, a template, and so we're plugging it in. I had delegated to different staff to do different parts of this budget, and so this was one of the last pieces to be, again, quickly put through this document before we would be able to deliver it yesterday from that standpoint.
Somebody thought we had a water director?
It's a software called SmartDraw, and
Yeah.
it defaults to other city templates.
Oh, I see, where
Yes.
they do have it. Okay. So that
So,
may. that
so they
may
might
add-
have taken Public Works as water director, I mean, it's just, again, it's the software. We were trying to utilize it because in previous cities where we put budgets together, we've always had an organizational chart that explains every department and who does what in this organization.
I understand, but this is this city. So I have a question about something else. Johnny, how many lieutenants do we have?
No, ma'am, they were copied and pasted to continue to build.
Okay, so I should ignore this chart. Very misleading.
In my PowerPoint, there's an updated one that I just showed
Yep,
right
yeah.
now.
Yeah, I understand, but I'm going with what I was given yesterday, so.
Ms. Winger, if you look, I don't know if you can see that, I can't hardly read it. No, we don't have 50 employees at the police department, there's only
Okay,
32.
okay, that's fine. Okay, very good. Just thought I'd ask, that's what we're doing here, right?
Good
Questions.
catch. We
Yeah,
were
okay.
scrambling on that one yesterday.
I'm not. Geez, I mean, I thought this was what we were working for, so.
Again, as I mentioned, this is obviously a working document, and we appreciate any input as we tweak, modify this budget over the next 30 days. Appreciate it.
Okay, good. Well, that's our job, isn't it? On page 42, now it says sanitation salaries are going up 13,000. Is that because of the 3% also, or?
By the way, we didn't, as a result of that, we didn't add water duties for Rick over there from that
Oh,
standpoint.
Rick
so-
has no water
Yeah.
tonight?
No, he's strictly doing some patching and other public works, but
I see.
no responsibility on water utility lines by Mr. Hurd.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Not anymore, anyway.
You've got, it includes the 3%. You also have several employees they also are in within the first 5 years, they move up a bracket, and that's what it entails. Also, I believe one gentleman moved over from streets into sanitation that was a slightly higher salary.
Oh, so
Originally,
he-
he was on the streets budget. Mhm.
Okay.
And to add to that sort of, I guess we call it step, and there's different variations in previous cities I worked for, but when you do have a salary plan in place, you do have those increments based on, being with the organization itself. I understand, Rick, that was put together back in 2012, 2013. So again, neither of us were here at the time when that was implemented from that standpoint.
Okay, thank you. On page 43, we have a cost, 16,000 for an electronic marquee. Where did that come from? I know, I didn't ask for money.
We've kind of been, again, looking at other cities and some of the recent ones that they have purchased. I reached out to Mr. Hill over in Chavano Park because they recently got one of those, and they had about 3 different quotes from that standpoint. So we just averaged or budgeted what they recently purchased theirs for.
Because I'm not interested in spending that kind of money since it was my suggestion. I just want to say that up front. What I was talking about, if you recall, was that since we have digital signs here, and we have an arrangement with Clear Channel, that we should get with Clear Channel and find out if they would charge us anything, because they built the digital signs. We did not pay for the digital signs. They built them. And if we can advertise on this sign, as Hollywood Park does, then they might be willing to build it for us, and we might get some income. And that's something that they can estimate, because it's their business, not ours. So that's what I want to know. I'm not talking about taking any money out of anything else for that sign. The idea was, would there be income from it? And they would be in a position, since it's their business, to tell us what kind of income we would have, whether they would charge for the sign, and if so, how much. And then we can determine whether we want it or not. I assume, I don't know whether they advertise at Chavano Park, because I haven't seen their sign, but if they do, they must have some income, and I know Hollywood Park has some income. So that was the model that I was using. I didn't know about the one in Chavano.
Well, that's a good segue, because next week we're going to bring forward the RFP for digital billboards, so that's maybe something we can include in those requests for proposals that we would like
Okay,
to
and
try
I
to-
asked if I could be included in that, because I wanted to find out directly.
Well, again, next week, all we're bringing is for
Okay.
me to move forward with the RFPs, and then when the bids come in,
Okay.
as we discussed with Mr. Gregory today, that we can establish a committee to review those bids.
Okay, great. I don't understand why we would spend $20,000 on a consultant to review the municipal building. That seems like a waste of money. You know, we don't even know that we're going to do anything, let alone spend money to review it. We do this a lot. We do it with engineers. We spend all kinds of money on studies, and then we don't have any money left to do the actual work. So I don't know how everybody else feels, but I'm not, that's an awful lot of money for a city of our size, given, you know, how much we have for
Again, as I
streets.
mentioned, I think we got to look long-term and apples to apples, so putting a plan in place to evaluate this building and the needs over the next 5, 10 years will have to be programmed in future budgets. So again, do you want to put money into this building long-term?
Yeah, I heard
Or do
that.
you want to have a side-by-side comparison to say, if we, again, built a new city hall down the line, how much that might cost? I'm just looking for comparables, and if we are going to do things, we need to make sure we program into the budget for future years.
Right.
Because right now, we haven't, because of what has happened with some of the HVACs that we, again, we didn't plan for, at least I wasn't here. It was not planned for in last year's budget, that was one-time expenditures out of emergency to fund those things. So just want to make sure it's
Yeah, well,
planned accordingly.
I heard Janet's presentation, and obviously, you know, if we have a situation with doors, we don't want to have rain pouring in, and I don't think there's a problem with awnings, but again, I don't think we need to pay somebody to tell us that, since we've already been told that. All we need to do is price out what the awnings are. There's, you know, do a bid and, you know, see what they cost. We don't have to have another fee on top of that. But I do have a question, because Nora was explaining to me after the last meeting that the doors that Janet was talking about are actually the aluminum doors in the main lobby. And so I don't know if you're also talking about the wooden doors here, because that's what I understood.
No, I think she's referring to the wooden doors here that needs to be replaced, right, Chief?
Not those? Okay.
We're getting the ones on the outside of the building,
Uh-huh.
because they're the original city hall doors, and they have to,
No, they're not. No, they're not. No, they did not. We bought them in 1999.
I don't know.
Yeah, I do know.
That's what the understanding was that Janet had. So she wanted to move them inside.
Yeah, but my question is, when you move them inside, why are we moving those particular doors?
Preservation of the doors.
Well, we can preserve those doors. There are all kinds of people that do that.
Well, it's my understanding again that it costs a substantial amount of money to stain and treat those, and it was only done a year ago, so it's a recurring.
It's continued to erode and deteriorate, so again,
Well,
that's
part
why-
of that is because, but there is a cover over that.
Very little, and I think Councilman McCormick had brought up a point about possibly covering it further, which would indeed preserve those doors, but moving them in, I don't know what the cost was there, that was relatively cheap.
Okay.
Aluminum doors, but also satisfying.
I think it was the cost, the ultimate cost for replacement of those doors, not necessarily to move those doors in, per se.
Well, I think Janet said it was $7,000.
I believe so.
That was the figure.
No, to replace them
Replace them and,
with weatherproof type, whether aluminum or iron or, so she was getting different quotes from that stuff.
Well, heat-resistant glass would be nice.
I think the idea is, again, to long-term and weatherproof them, so. We can check in on the bulletproof, Mayor.
Okay. I just have a couple more. The increase for contract personnel, this is on page 65 for Munich Court, is $7,000. Any reason for that? Because you just said we only have one person.
okay, no, that is the bailiffs. That's for your on court days?
And that's an additional 7,000?
No, we moved, they're working on doing contract people right now. Some of our police officers come in and are bailiffs and security, so their salaries get put in, and so I decreased.
But that's like overtime or something?
I guess it would be considered overtime, but it comes out of this fund. So when they turn in their hours, when we go through payroll, it is
So
expense.
they're not really contract personnel? That's what
But
I'm
we're
trying
looking to move to contract personnel, yes.
to move them in or out?
To get contract people, other people, sorry.
Since our,
We recently brought in contractors because their cost is so much lower to help us.
Oh, rather than the overtime?
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
it's,
Paying out of the court security fund, which is automatically taken out of the
This is what she's,
Okay,
I went down here.
okay,
So we're trying to minimize the cost there, and officers cost more than the contract security does.
okay, okay.
and I think, again, part of this is just evaluating the operating funds in general, and going through this in particular, we figured out that, from a cost-effective standpoint, as the chief said, to contract versus having our, salaried, our full part-time police officers here to do court.
Okay. And I'm going to skip a couple here, but the last one I have is, on page 79, there's a whole sheet about debt service, and we don't have any debt, so what's that all about?
That's a glossary, and that's the glossary about terms. And at the beginning, there is discussion of what cities can have as revenue sources, and debt's considered a revenue source. So this is just a glossary. Again, this document has pieces in it that the cities go out for what's called a GFOA award, which is Government Finance Officers Association, which is nationwide and actually outside of the U.S. And there's an award, and certain things are required to be in that document. And yes, well, you'll see a lot of cities have this type of document. And so I brought those things that are just fairly standardized in a larger budget document. So.
But unnecessary in our case.
Well, you could issue debt, so that way the information is there and what debt, what it's called and what the
Okay.
types.
Thank you.
But you don't have any current debt.
And
Thank
again,
you very
I
much.
know there's been discussion, again, we've talked about streets and drainage, about the possibility, and that's why I mentioned it in this budget proposal, because if we did issue bonds, it'll be done during this budget, if that is the case. If that's a direction y'all's council want to do, is issue C of Os, Certificate of Obligations. Again, that's a helpful explanation, because in most cities that have debt, you start talking about the M&O and the INS, and that's when your debt service comes in, because you're issuing bonds. It's just trying to help explain certain areas where someone may not understand the portions of the budget, especially within our funds.
Right, but you can understand how that would raise a question because we don't have any debt, so, thank you.
At the end of the day, I mean, we should hope and strive to get a GFA award from that standpoint. I mean, that should be our ultimate goal when we're putting this budget to bed from that standpoint.
We're going to start, a little start.
Yeah, it's called baby steps right now.
Douglas, I think you might have a question or two.
See if I can do it before 8 o'clock. Mrs. Scott's concerned about we're in violation of the number of employees we've had in the city. Reality is that over the many, many decades, we've had less, but no more. That was more of a ceiling, not necessarily a mandate that we always have to have it. I've been here quite a long time, and we've had less in both departments for a long period of time, because in several cases, we were in recession, and the city manager said that is the one way that we will delay hiring of people for a period of time. So it's not a mandated thing, you have it no matter what. It is more or less a ceiling. With regard to Encode has been looked at several times and been rejected by several city managers in the past. What we have right now is a current opinion from somebody who is not the city manager. But it has been looked at by at least 2 city managers, and they both rejected it. I wasn't clear, the marquee, you're talking about this marquee out in front right here. If it went you were talking about it, making it an electric marquee. Was there talk about selling advertising on that marquee?
I was.
He was. Is that even considered anymore? Because that could end up paying for itself.
Well, that was my point. I was using Hollywood Park's model. I wasn't using anybody else's.
Okay. With regard to the covered parking was brought up in the Crime Control Prevention District meeting about 12 years ago. When 2 police chiefs prior to the current one wanted it, they, I think, should be the ones who fund it. The problem with it is, where exactly are you going to put it? And what is going to be the danger if we have another hailstorm we had the last? Now, of course, insurance would cover it, but it would increase insurance costs. But that has been looked at in the past, but it was, it's more or less the responsibility of the Crime Control District than ours, because that's what they looked at.
I think in general, I think we're just, again, I know Ms. McClin is referring to the mitigation plan. You know, when I first got here, and I was curious why we didn't have our assets and our investments, like our vehicles, probably on average, Chief, probably $50,000 with the MDTs and all of that in the heat itself from that standpoint. But I was understanding that we paid like $30,000 deductible for hail damage, when in general, you probably paid half of that for just carports to protect them. But it was just illogical to me so Chief can elaborate.
Yeah, no, that was pretty accurate, except I don't think we paid 30,000 deductibles. It was more like 8. I think there was eight units or 9 that were damaged, and $1,000 deductible each. And we actually, there was some revenue there because we were able to get them fixed cheaper than what TML, for less than what TML gave us. Of course, we don't want that to be, we don't want to go through that again, and we certainly don't want to roll the dice on making money off of which that wasn't the point. We certainly want to pursue the covered parking for a number of reasons. Hail is only one of them. I think the Texas sun does more damage than any hailstorm can do to most of that electronics in there. That said, there was some differences on what portion of the parking lot we would do, that kind of thing. We've priced it out several times just in my tenure here as well. Mm-hmm. And I agree, Councilman, that crime control should at least take the lion's share of that, you bet. And supplemented possibly with seizure if necessary.
That's right. I think City Council should discuss, or at least give some thought, to whether the monies we are setting aside for the purchase of future vehicles, be it future fire trucks, future garbage trucks, should be immediately used for streets, at least until the period if we paid off the current fire truck. We only get $250,000 a year for street repair coming in for sales tax. That would, you could augment, there are several different places you could augment that to, you might get it up to $450,000. One of the key things that I don't see anywhere in here, and I'm not sure this is the place for it, unfunded liabilities. The only time I ever even see a mention of unfunded liabilities of the city, it has been in the past in audits. Do you have the number of our unfunded liability at this moment?
We could obtain that from TMRS. Most cities don't put that in their budget unless it's something severe, and you have one rate, you don't even have a phase-in rate, but we can certainly get TMRS to give us more information about that.
The reason I asked this, I remember it was about when was it, Tim? About 12, 14 years ago, we suddenly looked in the budget and we had an unfunded liability approaching $1 million. And we looked at each other and said, where the heck did this come from? And it was given an explanation. And we unwound all that. Then it came back, of which I have to admit, I believe I inadvertently voted in favor of bringing it back. But I think this is something we've got to look at immediately as something, because this could really rear up and bite us in the future, because costs of various things are not going down unless we have deflation. I'm glad that, you see, the flow chart I found interesting too, because I really would like to meet that 1.5 person that was in the sanitation department.
Yes, I saw
And
that.
I said, well,
Yeah,
hey,
not very many street
maybe
people.
that half a person that can help me lose my half of me.
Yeah. He has
But
two
It's a very busy gentleman.
the various flow charts we have here, should we just cogitate on these things for a while? Because I frankly was sort of surprised about dispatch. That dispatch has gone up to, let's see, this is the second revision, 6 full-time and 4 part-time. What I'd like, if you all could provide for me anytime in the next reasonable period of time, a listing of all the new part-time and full-time employees that have come on board since fiscal year 2015.
We can do that, certainly. And that increase was only in part-time. The 6 for dispatch has been what I inherited in 2013. I don't know what it was before then, Councilman. I can't speak to that. But the part-time we increased as a result of Wedgwood and some of the other incidences where we really got in a bind and could have used the extra resources as a as-needed basis. We don't bring them in all the time. We use them to supplement. We're budgeted $10,000. We certainly, with the exception of this year, and we can confirm some of that, Councilwoman Winger, excuse me. But we normally stay well under the allotted part-time budget. And whether we had 4 or 8, we don't pay them anything unless we bring them in and we stay underneath that budget. We usually don't even reach it. But Wedgwood and some of the other seemingly major incidents that we've had have caused some increases there. But that was also demonstrated the need, and it's an industry standard to have part-time dispatchers on staff for that purpose. So there's not a cost to them unless we use them, and we try not to use them except to periodically to keep them at a requisite level of trained.
But that was 4 years ago.
Yes, ma'am. No, but we can't predict them. I mean, we don't know. So we keep them, but we don't bring them in very often. We have one that comes in monthly for about 4 hours. That's it. So the numbers, don't let those weigh too heavily on you. The numbers as far as the allotted slots, they're not used unless we absolutely bring them in, and we're very judicious in how we bring them in and for what purposes.
So, Councilman Gregory, so were you referring to just in dispatch for full and part-time since 2015? Or the entire organization?
The entire organization.
Oh, okay. Just want to make sure that's of understanding.
About the previous, not before Wayne Davis, that Chief Davis,
Donnie Davis, yes, sir.
for years, we were very prideful of our dispatch. In fact, Crime Control paid over $200,000 for the state-of-the-art equipment that we've had. And prior to that, we always were able to find people that we could dispatch for and get paid. It was a substantial sum for some time. I don't think your predecessor was big on that. He said, oh, I've really looked around. Well, I'm not sure about that. Johnny, have you looked?
I have.
Have you seriously looked
I
around?
gave a quote to to Almost Park about a month ago, waiting to hear back from that chief. Yes, sir. And short of that, most are trying to hang on to their dispatch centers, or like Leon Valley, have gone from Helotes to county, and more often than not, wishing they wouldn't have done that.
Yeah, we've sort of beat that
Yes, sir.
to death.
Yes, sir. But no, we have. And to answer your question, I gave a quote to Almost.
Well, I'm glad,
Park.
because that's the first time in about 5 years.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. You bet.
Now, one thing, I looked at this list of all the employees we have. The city manager says he's going to provide me a list with how much they make. a lot of the cost in the budget goes to overtime. And best that I can tell, we have 78 employees now, and only 8 are exempt. Now, an exempt employee is not an hourly employee. An hourly employee can get as much overtime as he or she can get. And is that time and a half? Usually, is that how it's computed, time and a half? Overtime.
For non-exempt, anybody that's eligible for overtime now, police and fire, police, their typical overtime rate. Fire is the same, but it's just a little bit different because of their, what used to be called Kelly days. But it still is 1.5, yes.
I notice here, who defines who is an exempt employee?
The federal.
Federal government does? Does that mean, okay.
They're the ones that give the definitions, so yes, obviously.
Could you
So
just
it-
send him the definition? That's what he's asking for.
So a deputy clerk in
Last time we
municipal,
met, we gave the definition, I provided the definition to you.
well, I have this, but I'm not sure that answered it, but I'll reread it again. There are just several things here. An assistant fire chief would be an hourly position. I find that unusual. A deputy clerk is an hourly position. We have several people on contract. It's just the project manager, if we ever have one, is an hourly position. That's rather startling to me. It really is, because that's where it seems to me that's where we've had trouble in the past. You have large amounts of overtime. Now, you could have a disaster that causes it or whatever, but I think that's something we've got to look at
Again, I
carefully,
think,
whether we can broaden the definition of an exempt employee or not.
I know based on our meeting we had the other day, Mr. Gregory, that was one of the things we will get to you as well.
Much obliged.
I said, I had a meeting with Mr. Gregory to talk about a number of things, including the budget and question he has, and those are a few things that we're gathering to provide to him.
Which we can all.
Sure, should be customary.
Well, I think I'm about finished. And it's just
One thing
a little
I'd like to
past
say, Mr. Gregory, and I know we've talked about this before, and I'm hearing again, in this proposed budget, you as council have priorities of things you may want to see. Obviously, as I mentioned and alluded to in my transmittal matter, that the discussions for street repairs is already something that's underway from that standpoint. My emphasis again is saying that we need to be able to put a CIP plan together that corresponds with this budget. So each year, we have a defined plan that illustrates which streets we're gonna do each year and allocates that funding each year corresponding to what streets are gonna be done over the next 5 years. Again, like any other city that has an infrastructure plan of some type for streets and drainage, those projects are prioritized and rated and funded on an annual basis. And so again, I think as we move forward, at some point, we need to construct the CIP that's aligned with next year's budget so we know exactly how much is going to streets. And if it's a priority for y'all to add to that, then y'all could do that as we're moving through preparing the budget for next year.
I think that's a reasonably good idea, because most people, the last street committee, most people thought we got $1 million a year from the street tax. They actually thought that. We get just $250,000. That's all we have to worry. That's probably one bad street, maybe two.
Again,
That's why the unfunded liability question. I'd like to see where we're putting money aside, if we're putting aside any money at all, toward the payment of these unfunded liabilities, and I'd like a recommendation from you both as to whether or not we should get rid of our unfunded liabilities. I think we ought to get rid of them yesterday, but I'd like to know what the figure is and what we're doing about putting money aside for it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Mr. City Manager. And
Yes, sir. Again, I just want to emphasize, I know that there are work that needs to be done on street and drainage, and there's funds available, and it's just a matter of prioritizing and putting in a plan, because right now, without sort of direction to say, this street is a priority versus this street, or this drainage improvement's more of a priority versus this drainage improvement, and how to allocate and fund and program those dollars each year is not in plan or in place right now to do that. And so as a priority, if you keep saying direct funds towards street repairs and drainage, well, that's the direction we go from that standpoint in a constructed plan for infrastructure.
Okay, let's, first, Skip, did you have anything else to say?
What about you, Tim?
Huh? Oh, well, I bet you were waiting for that, huh? Okay. I'm actually going to go, excuse me, Skip. I'm actually going to go down this list here, and most of this was, the only real question I had, and I'm not on a witch hunt, all I want to find out is these accounts that were, found to be pass-throughs now, which would inflate the budget in the past. It doesn't matter who did it and who didn't do it. Are all those cleaned up now to where and it sounds like council understands that where that money went and where the line item is? Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah, we put them so they'll go to the balance sheet, so yeah.
Okay. Really, everybody else, all the other questions I had were answered. I would, personally, I like the way that the budget was presented, but I think that it was kind of a shock to some that, because of the, I'm used to seeing this on a corporate level, okay, where you got the little pie charts and everything, and then you go back to the original, but that's why I think there was some confusion on that, but it's not a negative thing at all. In the corporate world, we just look at the little pies and we don't even look at the back sheets. In the city world, I can remember going line item by line item for the past 20 years and over in that other room till 4 o'clock in the morning. And so anyway, with that said, let's try to wind this up. Skip, did you have anything that you wanted to say?
No, I think the comments from all the council members were significant, and I was very pleased at Ms. Scott's comments and Ms. McLean's comments, and every other comments that we've had I thought were helpful. Other than that, I've got nothing to add other than my appreciation to Mr. Rapley and Ms. Figgins and those of the staff who were here to participate in the budget presentation.
Thank you, Skip. Ms. Scott, did you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I want to thank everyone for your hard work getting this document out, turning it out as quickly as you did and getting it out to us ahead of time. It's a beautiful document. It's the best budget I've seen, and I've gone back and looked at a lot of other budgets that have been put out in the city, so thank you so much for that. I did have one little rebuttal about what Mr. Gregory had to say about my comment about the municipal code. I understand recession means you don't have money to do things, so you don't have money, things don't happen. But if you don't have money, that's not equal to breaking the law. We have an ordinance in place, which is the law. If I don't have money for my car registration, I can't just keep driving my car. I have to start taking the bus, or I have to find another way to get around. So if we have less money coming in, we had a recession, cutting positions is fine as long as it's not ordained by ordinance. So that's just my point there, is if it's part of municipal code, it's part of municipal code. So if we don't have the money for something, let's make sure that we're cutting positions that are not mandated. And other than that, thank you so much for...
Thank you. And again, I think it's a different perspective if we're coming to you sort of in a deficit that says, hey, we've got to figure out a way to balance this budget.
Right, then we can make changes to the ordinance that would help with the budget and help everything come to fruition. But we're not coming at a deficit this year, thank God.
Okay, Ms. McGlynn, did you have any comments?
I did have one other thing going back to the conversations that at the tail end of Mr. Gregory's comments about streets and having a CIP and planning. It became painfully clear to me after considering West Avenue and the slurry seal, coming to Antler and discussing that dealing with streets and drainage in the micro is impossible to make a decent decision. You have to be looking at the bigger picture and the budget overall. And us looking at $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 at a time, it's going to be impossible to do a good job for streets and drainage. We have to look at a bigger picture, and I appreciate going towards having a CIP and coming up with a larger financial plan for dealing with streets and drainage that will be more productive than trying to find nickels and dimes and pennies in our car pockets, you know, the pouches in our car. Thank you for your work on that.
Again,
Thank you.
Ms. McGlynn, I know we've worked on this, and it's a draft still, that strategic plan, but at some point, I think we're going to have to conclude and finish and provide that to City Council, because at the end of the day, we need some type of strategic plan and direction in aligning that CIP and helping us program the budget in future years.
Thank you. Ms. Swinger, did you have any comments, please?
I do. I realize that, you know, different members of the council may be coming at this from different points of view, which I think is very healthy. I truly appreciate all the thought from all the members of the council, because I think it's been, you know, very educational for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Swinger. Mr. Gregory, did you have any comments on this, please?
I want to recognize one person who's come to every one of these budget meetings, even with me, prior to when I was on the council, and that's Laverne Jaffett. She and I would be the only people in these budget meetings year after year after year, and we've seen some really remarkably crazy budget meetings. So Laverne, hats off to you. You and I are the only people who've stuck through this through the years, but you didn't have to. So congratulations to you. Thank you, Mr. Rapley, for the presentation. I'm sure the council's going to be,
Let's not forget William Bueller, because up until now, he's come too.
well, yes, up until now. But I know we'll change things in this budget. It is inevitable there'll be changed items, but thank you for the groundwork, and we'll work on it over the next few weeks.
Laverne, would you like to take a victory lap there? Of course.
Laverne, if you would come up to the mic, the people who are watching would be able to hear you.
There you go.
I'm just going to show it to the city manager here. I was just using your figures here. It says the budget for the 2018 was $7,400,000 and some thousand, okay? And over here at the end, where you're saying the projected ending is $6,920,000. So the we over budgeted like $4 million. Is that right?
No, 400.
Excuse me,
And
I'm
it's
400,
yes.
427, I'm sorry.
But yes, it's exactly what
well,
Ms.
okay.
Wenger was asking about.
Yes.
It's the removal of the 3 pass-throughs, which is
Well,
Lineberger.
yeah, but I just
and-
want to be
yes,
sure
yes,
that,
that's the
I didn't
majority.
hear anybody say anything about the budget and what it was
Yes,
moved down
that's
to as a
the
total.
most, that is the
So
biggest.
$400,000 is a good figure to saying you were over budgeted, or we didn't need it, or whatever.
It's, yeah, I mean, the budget you're currently in is pretty good on revenues.
Okay,
Yes,
that's all
and
I
so we
wanted to
didn't make
say.
a lot of changes to revenues,
Okay,
yes.
I just wanted to be sure that we were, wasn't the other way.
No.
Whatever, you know.
Good questions.
Laverne, I wanted to say one thing. Next time, could you wear a red blouse? Because I was looking out there for cues, and you blended into the seat.
Mayor, again, I think I understand what she was trying to bring forward and indicate to us that overall, as we were trying to explain, that the city's in good financial condition and that we're bringing a balanced budget and we're moving forward with those things. And again, it's the council's decision to prioritize dollars for different things from that standpoint. But we're not coming in as a deficit, and overall, we're in pretty good financial health from that standpoint.
Tim, you may remember one last story. When I got on in 2003, you will think we're already on the council. Mike Shands came to me and said he was projecting a $900,000 deficit.
I remember that.
We ended up the year $54 to the black. So there's a long thing, many things can happen between now and the end of the next fiscal year.
I want to, in our final thoughts, I want to thank council for all their input, echo Ms. Winger's thought, and, we all have different ideas, but as long as our heart is in the right place, we can beat it up and beat it to death and then beat it up again. Somehow, in the end of the day, we come out better for it. So I want to... What?
We've got to consider the property tax rate.
You guys are going to miss me, I'll tell you that. All right. How about them Cowboys? Okay. Okay, we got 2 more items on the agenda. I was just seeing if y'all were awake. So we were considering action upon a tax rate for fiscal year 2019 and take a record vote to schedule public hearings on proposed tax rate. Mr. Rapley, can you get through that one pretty quick?
Some of the things related to our tax rate. As we talked about in our previous workshop meeting, what are the possibilities with the tax rate, especially with the implications of the tax freeze. But again, as we're moving forward, we propose not to increase the tax rate at this time from that standpoint.
Okay, so we handed out some information. Some of it you've already actually received. We just reprinted it again because it's more likely it's still in your another document. Again, tonight, the process is for you to propose a tax rate. Even if you decide to stick with tonight the current tax rate, you need to propose it, take a record vote. That's going to be in the publication that has to go into the newspaper. In this packet, there's 2 pieces of paper that are stapled together that would be the publication depending on how things go. So those are just for examples. So let me go start again on July 31st. We presented you with the effective and rollback worksheets. The next step is for council to consider a proposed tax rate. If the proposed tax rate was to exceed the rollback rate or the effective rate, whichever is lower, the city council must take a record vote and schedule required hearings. So this is the beginning of the portion for the budget process that begins the tax clock. Again, the clock would start it starts ticking, but if depending on what rate you propose tonight as to whether you will have to have additional hearings and which publication will go in the newspaper. So again, the next page, there's another page that says analysis of tax rate, which was in your presentation last week on the 31st. It's also in the budget book. The worksheet shows the expected revenue by tax rate based on the 2018 certified tax roll and the effective and rollback rate calculations. The city manager presented a balanced budget with the proposed tax rate of 0.501345 per 100 valuation. Again, that's the same tax rate you're currently at.
Can I just ask you a question? You have here that both the effective and the rollback are different rates, so, and
Yes.
this says ad valorem, so what are you calling the current rate?
The current rate is 0.50.
I know, but what do you call it?
The current rate.
Oh, just the current rate, okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yep, so that's what they can, Or in the notification, it'll say preceding years. The notification calls it preceding year.
The same rate for previous years.
Well, the
Because this-
notice says preceding tax rate, so that's, which is your current tax rate right now. And so we're proposing, the current budget document proposes the current tax rate, not changing it, at the balanced budget we presented. So, so tonight, you have the option to increase that rate, and we've kind of given you that information. You could go for every 1 cent. It would give you about $53,000 extra dollars. So if you wanted to increase the tax rate to 0.53 or 0.51, you have that option tonight. Whatever proposed rate you give tonight, you cannot exceed it when you adopt your tax rate on September 18th. So you could go below. So if you proposed a tax rate tonight that was a little higher than the current rate, and you get to the 18th and you want to go back down to the current rate, you can always do that. You just can't exceed whatever you propose tonight.
This is the time when we do that? Mm-hmm. I would like to move to approve the current rate.
Ms. Winger, we have a motion on the table to approve the current rate. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a first and a second. Would anybody like to discuss that?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm concerned if we commit ourselves to the 0.501345, and then Mr. Rapley and Mrs. Fegans gets into addressing some of the things that we brought up today, and we need another $100,000 in the budget, then we're stuck with trying to figure out some other way to get it. If tonight we decided to increase it by 2 cents, 3 cents, we can always, at September 18th, like Mrs. Vegan said, go back down to the 0.50 and say, you know what, we're good with our budget. But we've left ourselves no wiggle room over the next month as we consider street improvements that we want to do, we consider CIP. Any extra money at the end of the year, it's my understanding, is supposed to be has a designation to go into the street fund or something. There's some special designation. So anything extra would raise some extra money for streets, which is something that we're all committed to. So I feel like sticking with the 0.501345 for today is a dangerous position for us to take.
Thank you, Ms. McLean. Ms. Scott, go ahead.
I echo that exactly. If we pass it as is today, we're stuck with it. If we add on 3, 4, or 5 cents to it today, gives us some wiggle room. Even 2 cents on today, it gives us some wiggle room, then comes back and we are advised again, it doesn't need to change. Everything that we've asked for, all of our needs are met. Then we go ahead and pass it as is, and we leave it at the 0.5013. But if we leave it at that today, we're stuck with it forever. If we raise it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cents today, whatever, give us a little wiggle room, give our city manager and our finance director a little bit of wiggle room in there. It's so much easier to be able to make a change later than to not be able to make a change at all. That's my concern.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Mr. McCormick, do you have any comments on this, please?
Yes.
Okay.
The important thing that Mr. Rapley pointed out was, or Ms. Fagans pointed out rather, was that whatever rate we pick tonight is the maximum limit that we can pass when we make the decision on the 18th of September. There are a number of things that have already been brought up which are desirable, which we have not funded in this budget. For example, covered parking for the police vehicles, repair of the doors, external repairs to the building and so forth, which looks like to me might come up to somewhere around $100,000, $115,000 or so. And my thought would be that we ought to consider adding 2 cents to the figure that we have here. So it'd be 0.521345 would be the figure that I would recommend that we approve.
Okay. Ms. Winger.
Well, I oppose that, and the reason is that we haven't started cutting the budget yet. There has been no cut. Anything that we need can come out of cuts. As far as the coverage for the police cars, Johnny's already pointed out, that'll come out of the CCPD budget. So we don't need to add that in, but we have cut nothing so far. That's our job. And that's where we ought to be going and not increasing the rate. You're going to find that the public is not going to appreciate an increased rate.
Thank you, Ms. Winger.
All that's true. However, the fact is that whatever number we pick tonight is the maximum limit that we can approve on the 18th. Whether we can make cuts or not is something we can determine between here and there. If it comes to pass that we can get by with a lower tax rate, we can finalize that decision on the 18th. If we put in a lower figure than we wind up needing, we can't add it after we pick a number tonight.
Right.
So I'm saying that we should pick a number now that we can live with. We can subtract from it, but we can't add to it. That's the problem of picking a number now that is too low to allow us what flexibility we may come to need later on. We can always cut the number that we approve on the 18th, but we can't add to it if we pick a low number tonight. So
Mr.
I'm
Mayor?
recommending 0.521345 as our number for the tax rate.
Okay.
May I make an amendment to the motion on the table? I'd like to amend the motion to add the 2 cents that Mr. McCormick has suggested, to have a proposed tax rate of 0.521345.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have an amendment to the original motion. Let's go on. Douglas, you haven't spoke up yet.
Nothing to say.
Nothing to say. Okay, we have an amendment to the motion, the original motion to raise to, go ahead.
I have no additional comments.
Minnie, did you get that? Okay. We have an amendment to the motion on the table. We have a motion and we have a second. All in favor to the amendment to the motion? That's 3. All opposed? That's 1.
This is the amendment.
Do we have to do record vote on the amendment?
2 cents, that's the,
No, I do not.
no, this is what
Right, but this is the amendment to the agenda item.
Yes, Mayor.
We do have to have?
No, you're amending, you're just amending, okay.
Okay.
So what are we, we're voting on the
The final
amendment?
We're voting the amendment to the original motion.
I'm opposed to the amendment.
Opposed, okay, so we have 3-2. The item carries to raise the 2 cents, okay? What?
Oh, I didn't say anything, Mayor.
Okay, we're going back to the original, actually,
No, you
we have to go back and do a roll call vote because there is no original motion if the
Exactly, Mayor.
amendment passes. Will you read the amendment, please, again, Minnie? Minnie, will you read the amendment again that's on the table, please, to make sure that all of council understands, or we'll have Ms. McLean read it again. It doesn't matter. Okay, that was the amendment. Okay, it's required by law that we take a roll call vote.
It won't hurt to take it.
Let's take it, okay, just in case. I don't want it to come back and bite us. Mr., is that figure right? Is that the correct figure that we're talking about? Okay. All in favor, Mr. McCormick?
In favor of the amended motion.
Okay, Ms. Scott?
I vote aye, yes.
Okay, Ms.
Aye.
Winger?
No?
Mr. Gregory?
no.
Okay, so it's 3-2, it carries. All right, so let's move
Mayor,
on. Yes?
I just want to say real quick in response to Mr. McCormick, and some of the things over the next couple of weeks, we'll work to outline certain improvements and put a dollar figure to it so we have a better idea aggregately what we need to do as far as anything related to this building that we need to plug into this budget for this year.
Well, I think it's also important to take a look at the budget and just see where we're at. And then at the end of the day, we'll find out how much we can save.
Well, again, like I had mentioned earlier, from sitting down and with the department directors and trying to make this budget pretty lean from an operational standpoint to where we can still provide services, I think we did a pretty good job of vetting that out from that standpoint. Now, if there's funds within the budgets that council may want to evaluate further, we can still do that as we move through this process.
Okay. All right, let's go on to the next item, which is consider and act upon scheduling the public hearings on the proposed budget for fiscal year 2019. Mr. Rapley?
Yes, Mayor. Actually, as we itemized or put out in the budget calendar there, we have, two budget hearings. We actually have, let's see, are we referring to the first tax hearing? The public.
The public hearing for budget, so.
For the budget is Tuesday, September 11th, and the second reading is Tuesday, September 18th. So even though it's already been approved entirely as the calendar, we just want to make sure it's done as a singular item by council to notify our citizens, but that y'all have approved these council dates moving forward for the first and second readings of the budget.
Okay.
I know it seems.
Let's back up just for a second here. I noticed in item number 2 that are these hearings going to be the same as in item 3?
So you did not exceed your effective or rollback rate with that increase, so you will not have to have tax hearings.
Okay,
Which
all
are
right.
separate from your budget hearings. And so, I mean, there aren't required tax hearings.
Okay, so
based
let's
on
go
the
ahead and get a
law.
motion on the table
Yeah.
on this item 3, please, to schedule the public hearings on the proposed tax budget.
Does that mean we can't do it on the same night, the tax hearing?
No, you can go ahead and,
You don't have to have a tax hearing anymore. You didn't exceed the effective and rollback rate, which is the requirement under the property code, tax code, excuse me. And so, since you didn't exceed that, you won't have to have the hearings, and your ad won't have hearing dates for tax. But you do have to, per the municipal code, local government code under Chapter 102, you have to have budget hearings. So that's what this next item is for your budget hearings.
I thought we had already decided that on August the 8th, and what is today?
Well,
Oh, today's August the 8th.
We adopted your calendar, but typically councils make a motion specifically for budget to say when you're having those hearings. Because the way it reads, the governing body shall set the hearing date for a date occurring after the 15th day that the proposed budget is filed with the municipal court clerk. So typically cities, they don't just adopt their calendar and go on, they make it official. Because if we'd come along in the calendar, we hadn't done the budget tonight and submitted it, maybe we'd submit it next week, the calendar wouldn't match. Again, so it's just a formality.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we have the first reading of the budget on the 11th of September and the second meeting on the 18th of September.
I'll second that.
What were the days? The 11th?
That would be the 11th of September for the first and the 18th of September for the
Don't we have
second.
something going on the 11th? What do we have going on the 11th right now?
That's what was scheduled for the 11th. We're just
Okay.
confirming the
It's
dates
a
by
regular
vote.
council meeting, but
Oh.
we'll have it on the agenda for the first reading of the budget.
Okay.
We're doing the same night as a regular council meeting?
We'll just have it on the agenda. It's,
But we usually do that separately. We shouldn't have it on the same night as a regular council meeting.
Actually, that's something I agree with. But, of course, what do I know? I don't get a
Well,
vote.
because it takes up a lot of time, that's why.
again, this is
Agree
the
with
way we
Ms.
plugged
Winger.
it in from that standpoint, and in past experience, I've adopted budgets on regular council meeting nights, and, you know, again,
No, we haven't.
you can have this first reading of the budget on this regular council meeting, and it's just a matter of managing the agenda items for that night as well, but.
Yeah, but
we-
we're talking about a public hearing. So the public is going to come, and as, you know, Tim understands as well, it takes up a lot of time. It's not a fast thing. It's not like you just say, oh, well, snap, it's over with. So you don't want to put it on the same night, just for the same reason that I wouldn't want to have a workshop on the 14th.
Again, Ms. Winger, we clearly put it on the calendar here for September 11th, which identifies regular council meeting for the first budget reading.
Okay, so
This
we
was
can
approved.
change it.
What's that?
We're voting on that now, so we can change it.
We need to make sure I take the calendar and go backwards and work with her on the days that the publication has to be in the paper, to make sure we find a date that'll work.
So you
if y'all-
can't change it?
You may be able to move it a day or two.
Well, that's
We'll
all
need
I'm
to ca-
talking
I'll need
about.
to figure that out.
Let's
Let's
get that done pretty quick, folks. We have a motion and we have a second on the table. So if there needs to be an amendment, we need to do it now.
So what,
I move we change the date, one day either forward or one day backwards from the proposed date.
So it's going to be on a Monday or a Wednesday?
What do you prefer?
Wednesday.
I would,
Let's
we're
do it
just
on
gonna
Wednesday,
have
the 12th.
Wednesday.
Wednesday, the 12th. I propose an amendment to change the
Okay.
date for the first
Okay.
public hearing
Okay.
to Wednesday, the 12th.
There was a motion on the table for the 11th and the 18th, I believe, made by Ms. Scott, seconded by Ms., now we have an amendment on the table to do the 12th and the 18th, is that correct?
That would also be the 19th then, or we would keep the 18th?
The 18th is just a Tuesday. There's no city council meeting that night, so it doesn't really conflict with anything.
It could still work.
We
I
could
mean,
still do
that
the
day is-
18th?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
12th
that's
and the
fine.
18th. So
12th
we have
and
an
the 18th.
amendment, Mr.
At 6:30, just to clarify the time.
6:30, Mr.
We're going to publicize it too.
Will that give us the time we need between the two hearing dates? Will that give us the time we need but before publication, after publication to get to the first hearing?
yes.
Okay. Is there any requirement for more than 6 days between the two hearing dates?
It's 3 to 14, well, from your first hearing, you have to schedule an announced meeting to adopt tax rate 3 to 14 days from date, so that's fine. So you should be fine on, if you move it up just one day.
Mr. McCormick
And you've got
has,
several meetings between now and that date as well, so that's
And
not
he's
your
just
only-
asking if we needed to move the 18th. Do we need to move the 18th as well?
No, the 18th needs to stay. But, yeah, the 18th will not move.
Okay,
If you move that, that will affect, that's a lot of things, so yes, the 18th
Okay.
is good.
Are we still open for discussion?
do it?
Are we still open for discussion on this?
No, we got to do the amendment first. Because it was, okay, so we do the amendment to see if it passes, and we will go into discussion then. Mr. McCormick made an amendment to do the 12th and the 18th.
Did we get a second on the
Did we
amendment?
get a second on that amendment? We got one from Ms. Winger. Okay, now we're into discussion, go ahead.
My question is, I'm thinking it would be better to have it with the council meeting, that we'd have a better attendance, we'd have a better turnout. Because if we're having a council meeting on Tuesday night, and then we're having a budget reading on Wednesday night, and it's hard enough to get people to come out after they've had a long day at work and they've gone home, I think we would have a better turnout for the budget meeting, and our whole point is transparency, have more people here to hear the budget and to participate as part of the regular city council. That's why I firmly feel it would be better to leave them on the 11th and the 18th. That's just my opinion, since we're having discussion.
Anybody
I'd like to
else?
discuss the fact that we might have a better turnout having them back to back.
well, you're probably right, but they won't stay, so it doesn't matter.
Good point. Anyone else want to comment on that?
No, I agree with Mrs. Scott that
Mayor, I think again, that the Scott has the right from the opinion side of it, but again, it's all you manage the agenda. So if we have a few agenda items with the budget itself, it's manageable. Now, if we have, again, multiple or a number of agenda items that's been pretty close to the last two council meetings, then yes, it'd probably be an overload of agenda items for a meeting.
I support your enthusiasm, but I would think that for a while, there's going to be a lot of agenda items. Not that I agree with either way, but at the moment, we're at the 12th and the 18th, and we do need to get a vote on that. Anybody else want to say anything? Douglas? Okay, Leslie, we know where you stand. Okay, they're good. All in favor of the 12th and the 18th? 3, all opposed? 2, goes 3 to 2. Thank you. The 12th and the 18th. Now,
And Mayor, we'll update the calendar and provide it with the proposed budget online as well. We'll make that modification to indicate that as well.
and I start advertising it right now. If you could get Janet to be sure and put it on the city website, next door, put it wherever you have to. Let's get on the phone and wake up 11,000 people. Okay?
Okay, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Are we ready to adjourn?
No, we need your announcements and
Oh,
your, any other comments. Douglas?
We had a couple of deaths in the city. Mrs. Cruz died, a longtime resident of the city. She and her husband used to be fixtures here, especially when the question of the church was being debated. She will be missed. And George Booth's mother passed on,
Dorothy.
Dorothy, Sunday evening. She was 93. They will all be missed.
I was going to mention him.
Oh,
Yeah. And
Leslie.
Robert Nagel, who was famously the owner of Nagel's Gun Shop, passed away.
Ms. McLean?
I have no announcements tonight.
Ms. Scott?
My deepest sympathy, Mr. Booth. That's only.
Mr. McCormick?
Just for information, Mr. Nagel has a certificate in his store giving him a commendation for target shooting at 600 yards with iron sights. So just pass that along.
Oh, that's a good one. George, I've already expressed my condolences, but on behalf of the city of Castle Hills, I also want to, and I would like to, we'll do that in a public session coming up. Your mother, your father, I knew your father also. I've known you since the first grade. I know you don't want to admit it, but, you know, here we are, 60 years later. So, yes?
I'm sorry, for what it's worth, the boy daughter as well.
Who? Oh,
Tracy, lady behind the public works
yes.
Tracy, I don't know if her last name's McCroy, her son is Travis McCroy. Her grandma's on,
Yeah, her grandma lives over there.
Oh, really?
Not the Mingus.
She's a little girl?
No, she's an older lady, so. Yeah,
course.
they've lived here forever. Leslie, you would know them, they're on my side.
Oh. So they-
No, that's a joke, that's a joke. No, seriously, she lives, you know where Maggie and, whatchamacallit live? Maggie and,
And Fernando?
and Fernando. The next house right there, and then their daughter lived down on Persimmon across from, the vacant lot.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And they had a son named Travis.
Yeah, oh, Travis, yeah, okay. Okay. Got it now.
Okay, we got all that done. So, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Thank you again, council, and
Motion to adjourn.
do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
You bet.
So is it McCoy or McCoy?
LaCroix,
Oh, LaCroix.
LaCroix.
Oh, she died.
the daughter of the matron.